Hello chess friends and welcome to Zarov's chess channel and welcome to our Garry Kasparov series. So in this series we're following Garry's life and his chess career, and we're starting now a new World Chess Championship between Anatoly Karpov and Garry Kasparov. If you have followed my YouTube chess channel, then you know we have covered so far the 1984-1985 World Chess Championship, which was aborted by FIDE, which was one of the most paradoxical things in chess history that happened. So FIDE aborted the match game after 48 games. Garry Kasparov and Karpov mentioned that they wanted to continue this match game, but FIDE aborted it. We'll leave now this part of the history behind us. We're starting a new World Chess Championship. We have a fresh start, and both players, I think, prepared very good for this match game. Garry Kasparov played two match games. He won both of them. Anatoly Karpov played also a tournament. He also won his tournament. But the difference about this match game and the 1984-1985 match game was that they played on different rules. So the 1984-1985 World Chess Championship was played on the so-called Fischer rule. The winner of the match game would have been the first player who gets 6 wins, but now they played 24 games, and the winner is of course who gets more points out of 24 games. But Anatoly Karpov had draw odds, so if the result would have been something like 12-12, then Anatoly Karpov would have stayed the world champion in chess. So that's why Kasparov had to be active. He had to win this match game in order to become the next world chess champion. So we're starting now this match game with the game 1. Already in game 1 great things happened, really great attacking opportunities for both sides. It was an incredible game. We're starting now with the match game, and Garry Kasparov played here with the white pieces and opened with the move d4. So Karpov responds with knight to f6. We have c4, e6, knight to c3, and after bishop to b4 we have the Nimzo Indian defense. And mentioned many times, the idea about this Nimzo Indian is to play bishop to c3, b takes c3, messing up a little bit the pawn structure, and then going into two knight middle games where we're trying to create maybe sort of a blockade on dark squares with c5, d6, b6. But then we have a huge activity with our bishop to b7, and we can play something like knight to e4. So this idea to give up the bishop in an early stage of the game for the knight is sometimes a good positional idea when we are at least creating some kind of a weakness. So that's why after bishop to c3 white would have continued here with a double pawn structure, but Kasparov doesn't react, which was, I think, a very good approach here. He plays knight to f3. If you want to take the knight, take the knight, but I'm going to go into my fast developing style, and Karpov plays a very aggressive move, c5 immediately. So g3, this move I really like because it shows already that Garry Kasparov wants to have open games. He wants to play now very active. He had some troubles in the 1984-1985 World Chess Championship, in which he basically got outplayed by Karpov by playing too passively. I think here with the move g3, you see now already we have the tension in the center, so this collision between the pawns. We have a pin by the bishop on the knight, and Garry Kasparov with the move g3 opens already the long diagonal. So it has to be some kind of an active game, and I think this was a good approach by Kasparov to play very, very aggressively against Karpov. So Karpov continues with the move knight to e4. He pins the knight further. We have queen to d3, and we have now queen to a5. Very, very aggressive move also by Karpov. If you try something like f5 to maybe stay with your knight here on this very active square, I think we can simply develop, and here after maybe queen to a5 we can castle. This is a very nice approach by white. I think you should memorize this line if you have troubles to when your opponent is attacking. Sometimes you could go into sort of a gambit line. This wasn't played in the game, but here after maybe knight to c3, b takes c3, maybe something like bishop to c3, rook to b1, and here if for instance black takes, we can take. And you see now black has troubles to get with the bishop somewhere, maybe something like I don't know, bishop to b4 can happen, but now I think you should be really familiar with this tactical shot, rook to b4, after queen to b4, now bishop to a3, and here knight to b5, I think wins the game immediately. You see there's nothing that can be done. Knight to d6 will happen, and I think you're in serious trouble here from black's perspective. So this was the continuation after move f5. As I said, here bishop to g2 and castling. Even sacrificing a pawn is here a possibility, but we're playing on this fast development. So here here queen to a5, played by Karpov. He leaves the knight on e4 hanging, but Kasparov simply takes. But okay, we can also take bishop to c3. The problem is now you cannot recapture with the pawn after b takes c3, queen to c3, and you lose the rook. So that's why bishop to d2, bishop takes, knight takes d2, and now queen to b6, attacking further the pawn structure here, the weak b2 pawn, and now d takes c5. This, I think, was a surprising move by Kasparov. What we can notice now that Garry Kasparov has a double pawn structure on the c file. If you, for instance, take queen takes c5, then I think we can go again into normal developing style, bishop to g2, castling, and we have now at least an advanced pawn. You can never play d5 in the continuation of the game, and we can maybe, when we secure the king, kick away the queen with knight to b3, and then play a very annoying positional move, maybe c5. This move c5 would really, let's see a possible continuation. We here black castles, maybe we can castle, and let's see now knight to c6, maybe here knight to b3. If you play something like queen to e7, here c5 would be very, very aggressive, and you see you have troubles to develop the light square bishop, because d6 is weakening the pawn structure, b6 also, so that's why it's a very risky line here for black to take the pawn on c5. So here that's why Karpov takes the pawn on b2, Kasparov plays rook to b1, and now queen to c3, which was a slight inaccuracy. Queen to a3, maybe more accurate. The problem is now for the queen on c3 that the queen is a little bit endangered. But here, if you take something, if you take, for instance, the pawn on a2, then queen to d4 is very, very risky here for black. You have to castle, and now queen to c3 is also a very nice positional trap here, with threatening to trap the queen with rook to a1. So that's why here you have to retreat with the queen here to a6 maybe, or somewhere else. But oh, pardon me, let's go back. So here after queen to a6, we could, I think, simply go bishop to g2 and continue with our normal development. Still, I think black has troubles to play this move d6 or b6, so that's why it's a very, very strange game here for black. Although we have a double pawn structure, but it's really an annoying one. Black has some development problems. So after the move rook to b1, Karpov plays queen to c3. Here Kasparov plays queen to d3, forces now trades of queens. After trades of queens, what we can notice now that white has here, I think, a comfortable game in the center. We can advance the pawn here like Kasparov did. d4, we have now a very nice attacking formation here with the three pawns. Still, the light square bishop of blacks has developing problems. You have to again play b6 or d6, but again, you have to prepare this move, because if you play b6 too early, then bishop to g2 is very risky. You see, your rook has to go again to b8. We have now the tension on the b file. So as I said, again, really, really strange position here. So if you try, for instance, here e5, that could be also a possibility to maybe split the pawns to somehow grab this one. I think here bishop to g2, you take, and now rook to b7 is here also a threat. You see how you have troubles this to develop. If you try knight to c5, then you get rook to b5, again losing the rook. If you take the rook, of course, then you see we can simply take. After something like rook to b8, we can take, and the problem is now the b1 square is covered by the knight, so we're continuing now with two pieces against the rook. So I think this is also a comfortable game here for white. So that's why after the move d4, Karpov really has now some developing problems. He plays rook to b8, we have bishop to g2, now king to e7, and now king to e2. Very important move to get now the king towards the center. This is now already an endgame stage, and in an endgame stage you have to play active with your king. We have rook to d8, knight to e4, and now b6. We have knight to d6, and now knight to c7. If you try b takes c5, again this idea, rook to b8, knight to b8, and now we can simply take d takes c5. If you try, for instance, to develop the knight on a6, then you get knight takes c8, and here bishop to b7 is also again a threat. So you have to be careful here on light square. So that's why knight to c7 played by Karpov. We have rook to b4. Of course you cannot take so far. The rook is hanging on b8, so that's why knight to e8 was played. Knight takes e8, king to e8, and now rook to b1. Here Kasparov has already, I think, a good game. The evaluation is much, much better. There is this tension around around the square b6, you will lose probably the pawn in the game. And bishop to a6 was played, and now king to e3, getting out of the range of the bishop. We have d5, and now of course c takes d6 en passant, and now rook to c8. If you try to take rook to d6, it's not a problem. Again, you get the c5 move, you have to retreat with the rook somewhere, and we can simply continue to push. You have some troubles. c7 is also a threat. We can try a4, a5. So the activity of white's pieces is simply, I think, something too much to handle here for black. So after move c takes d6, rook to c8 was played, so Karpov cannot take the pawn in the game. King to d3 was played, rook takes d6, and now rook to a4, attacking the bishop. We have b5, c takes b5, and now rook to b8, but it can be protected with the move rook to b4, bishop to b7, and Kasparov simply trades off more pieces and has now, I think, a comfortable game. He has now a 2 versus 1 situation here on the queen side. Is up a pawn, has, I think, also a very important setup because his rooks are behind the pawns. If the rooks would have been somewhere else, maybe this could be protected, but here when we have a good activity with our rooks, 2 versus 1 situation on the queen side, it's perfectly fine. So king to e7, h4, h6, f3, we have rook to d5, and now rook to c1, getting use, of course, of this only open file on the board. We have rook from b to d7, and now a5. Here g5. If you try e5 to maybe again break the position, rook to c4 will happen. Nothing has changed by trading off more pieces here on the d file. We have, of course, again comfortable endgame because we have still an extra pawn, so that's why trading off the pieces over the board is not an option here for Karpov. He has to search for complications, and that's why he played the move g5. We have h takes g5, rook to g5, g4, h5, and now simply pushing this pass pawn. Very important move, b6, a takes b6, a takes b6, and now rook to b7. If you try to take somehow, then we can simply push and it will be game over. So after the move a takes b6, Karpov blocks the pawn with rook to b7, and now we have rook to b4, forcing another trades of rook. So that's why f5 was played. We have g takes h5, rook to h5, and now king to c4. Very cool move here by Kasparov. He gets his king very actively into the game. This rook is cut off here by the pawn, so it's simply too far away from the action. We have rook to h8, king to b5, rook to a8, and now rook to c4. In this position, Karpov resigned. So let's see possible continuations. I'm not sure what to do here. Even if you try to play something like king to d7, we can simply takes, and the king has to move. We can simply push the pawn further, or maybe something like rook to a7, and then simply getting our king towards here b6, then b7, and this is game over. So okay, very interesting game, very interesting approach by Kasparov in this first game. Very nice setup, and he played very actively against this Indian defense that Karpov chose. So Kasparov has now a 1 point lead. We'll see what happened in the continuation of the match game. Very interesting after this abortion match. But okay, interesting facts here that Karpov, I think, in this game didn't have any counterplay. This was fully deserved win by Kasparov. He played here almost to perfection. If you put this PGN into the engine, it will show you that Kasparov had only 1 inaccuracy. So incredible stuff. We'll see now, as I said, what happened in the continuation of their match game. Be prepared, again, some wild things will happen. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed this game. Really enjoyed it a lot. Interesting setups. If you want to see more Garry Kasparov games, check out my Garry Kasparov Path to Glory, the Garry Kasparov playlist. Here's the link. And if you want to see maybe the best chess games of all times, check out my best chess games of all time series. Here's also the link. And if you like this content, you can also subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.